शृणुयाम देवाः। भद्रं पश्येमाक्षभिर्यजत्राः। स्थिरैरङ्गैस्तुष्टुवागुंसस्तनूभिः। व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः। स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृद्धश्रवाः। स्वस्ति नः पूषा विश्ववेदाः। स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः। स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। आत्मानमरणिं कृत्वा प्रणवं चोत्तरारणिम्। ज्ञाननिर्मथनाभ्यासात् पाशं दहति पण्डितः। स एव माया परिमोहितात्मा शरीरमास्थाय करोति सर्वम्। स्त्रियन्नपानादिविचित्रभोगैः स एव जाग्रत्परितृप्तिमेति। स्वप्ने सजीवः सुखदुःखभोक्ता स्वमायया कल्पितविश्वलोके। सुषुप्तिकाले सकले विलीने तमोभिभूतः सुखरूपमेति। पुनश्च जन्मान्तरकर्मयोगात् स एव जीवः स्वपिति प्रबुद्धः। पुरत्रये क्रीडति यश्च जीवस्ततस्तु जातं सकलं विचित्रम्। आधारमानन्दमखण्डबोधं यस्मिन् लयं याति पुरत्रयं च। एतस्माज्जायते प्राणो मनः सर्वेन्द्रियाणि च। खं वायुर्ज्योतिरापः पृथिवी विश्वस्य धारिणी। यत्परं ब्रह्म सर्वात्मा विश्वस्यायतनं महत्। सूक्ष्मात् सूक्ष्मतरं नित्यं तत्त्वमेव त्वमेव तत्। जाग्रत् स्वप्न सुषुप्त्यादिप्रपञ्चं यत् प्रकाशते। तद्ब्रह्माहमिति ज्ञात्वा सर्वबन्धैः प्रमुच्यते। त्रिषु धामसु यद्भोग्यं भोक्ता भोगश्च यद्भवेत्। तेभ्यो विलक्षणः साक्षी चिन्मात्रोऽहं सदाशिवः। मय्येव सकलं जातं मयि सर्वं प्रतिष्ठितम्। मयि सर्वं लयं याति तद्ब्रह्माद्वयमस्म्यहम्। अणोरणीयानहमेव तद्वन्महानहं विश्वमहं विचित्रम्। पुरातनोऽहं पुरुषोऽहमीशो हिरण्मयोऽहं शिवरूपमस्मि।
Mantras 12 and 13 talk about how the all-pervading Brahman has become the individual. In other words, the creation of microcosm, and then further how this microcosm is enjoying the macrocosm or experiencing the macrocosm, which is the entire universe. How it has emerged from Brahman is being explained here. But the emphasis is that it is the Supreme Brahman which assumes the individuality as conditioned consciousness and plays in the three cities of Jagrat, Swapna and Sushupti, which is waking, dream and deep sleep, as three different entities. This is the essence or purport of this mantra. How that exactly happens is what is explained here. And the key term here obviously in this mantra is Maya Parimohitatma. There is a trivia that what we follow is the Vedanta, and amongst the various schools of philosophy, Adi Shankaracharya expounded and re-established what is known as the Advaita Siddhant, that is the non-dual Vedanta. There are various other schools also. The three famous schools are Vishishta Advaita, Dvaita and this Advaita. And there are, as I said, various other schools of Vedanta philosophy itself, which are still being followed and adhered to, but may not be as prominent as these three. There is Shuddha Advaita, there is Dvaita Advaita, there is Bheda Veda Vedanta. Even Bhakti Vedanta is an aspect of another school of philosophy. Like that, there are various schools of philosophy. All of them keep their base or pramana as the Vedantic scriptures, which is the Upanishads only. They are not following or quoting some other scriptures. Everybody's base material or the scriptures are the same. But what they want to finally establish, there are slight differences, and it is according to each person's interpretation. One of the key objections from the other schools of thought to Advaita Vedanta, which is talking about the unity of Brahman, and whatever you see other than Brahman is attributed to a concept called Maya, which Shankaracharya obviously explains in detail, which is there also in Buddhist philosophy. They object to this because they say the principal 10 Upanishads, which is collectively known as the Dashopanishad, none of them has this term called Maya. It's a very interesting phenomenon. We see in Bhagavad Gita it is there. We see in later it is there. But in the principal Dashopanishad, it is not that these 10 Upanishads alone are the authority and other Upanishads are anyway less. But these Upanishads are given weightage because these principal 10 Upanishads are the key sources which the Acharyas have taken up and interpreted and commented. Adi Shankaracharya, Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, when they wrote commentaries on Upanishads, all of them chose these 10 Upanishads. These 10 Upanishads is enough, that's what they considered. So that in no way is going to bring down the stature of any other Upanishad. It is just that a weightage is given because of the commentaries available in a traditional way by the Acharyas. That's about all. So one of the trivia facts is that it is not, this word doesn't appear in those 10 Upanishads. Mundaka, Prashna, Ishavasya, Kena, any of these Upanishads, Brihadaranyaka. But we see that in Kaivalya Upanishad it comes. And another Upanishad is Shvetashvatara Upanishad, which also Adi Shankaracharya quotes profusely in his commentary on Brahma Sutra. So that is why our Swamiji always talks about 11 Upanishads. 11 out of 108 is considered very authentic and sacred, he always says, if you had listened to his lectures. This 11 is 10 plus this one only, Shvetashvatara. Shvetashvatara Upanishad has this word Maya, I think. Mayantu Prakritim Vidyat Mayanantu Maheshwaram. That mantra comes, I think, in Shvetashvatara Upanishad. So it is just a trivia, a fact. But in this Upanishad, very clearly, this word Maya comes here. Maya Parimohitatma. So this term Maya is the middle factor which has to explain the creation, without which it is impossible to derive whatever we are experiencing, how it has come about. By the very definition, or you can't even say it is definition, by the very essence of what that word is, Maya is inexplicable. that which cannot be explained is called as Maya. That which is not there is called as Maya. Ya Ma. Ya means she who, that which, in that sense. It's a feminine term, so she who. Ma, not. That's what Swami Ramtirtha says, not that. Ya Ma Sa Maya. So that which is not there, how can anybody give an explanation to it? So if anybody says, why are you not able to explain Maya? We are saying that that which cannot be explained is called Maya. So the question itself is not applicable there. So Swami Ramtirtha brings in this concept in while he was explaining this illusion, intrinsic and extrinsic illusion. Post that he says, you apply this definition of that which is not there, not that, to anything that you can experience. Any answer that you try to give, it will only finally come as not that, not that. But what is it then? Don't know. But it is not that. That sort of a thing is called as Maya. Is this world real? No, not that. Maya. This world is not real because it is constantly changing. How can it be real? Real is defined as that which is existing at all periods of time. So, the answer is Maya, it says. So, is this world unreal? No, again Maya. Unreal is that which never exists. That which is not there in the past, that which is not there in the present, and it will not be there in future. So, world doesn't conform to that definition also. Because it is very much there as long as you experience it. It produces effect upon you. So how can you say it is not there? So again he says Maya. So is it partly real and partly unreal? Again Maya. Not that. Because reality and unreality can never coexist. So what is it then? Then he says that's what it is. It's Maya. Leave it at that. So it cannot be really fully probed into and understood intellectually. What we experience something from our standpoint, but which is not there from the point of view of the substratum or the source. That how does it happen? This is what is meant by Maya. See, Vedanta proclaims that Brahman alone exists, nothing else exists. This is the declaration of all the Vedantic scriptures, statements. In its inherent nature, it is Sat, Chit and Ananda. Sat, Chit, Ananda is the Swarupa of Brahman. It is the primeval cause. It is from which that everything is emerging or emerged. Whatever you can think of or conceive of, nothing else apart from Brahman is there, is the declaration. Now when we talk about cause and effect, we have to understand and remember it is not the general relationship of cause and effect as we see in the world. See, with reference to cause and effect, there are various ways by which we can understand it. The cause grows into the effect at a future date. Example is a seed is the cause and tree is the effect. What is the seed today is having the full potential of the tree inside it, and when it is properly nurtured, it grows into a tree. So the seed in that form is gone and the effect has come out in some other form. So the seed is, as it were, changing itself into tree, but in a totally different dimension. You cannot correlate this effect to this cause, but the essence of the tree was inside the seed. So this is where after the effect is manifest, the cause is disappeared. But what about when we say Father is the cause and Son is the effect? There, Father is there as the cause, Son, the effect is also there. After the Son has come as the cause, the Son as the effect, the Father who is the cause, continues to remain. So what is it actually is the relationship between cause and effect here? The essence of the cause has produced the effect. It is the essence. So the father as the cause has given his essence, which has transformed itself and grown into a son. That is why you see the properties of the cause seen in the effect. It is the relationship between what is known as a amshi and a amsha. Amsha means essence. It is a aspect. It is an essence. So here the cause is very much there, and the essence has produced the effect. Is the relationship between father and son as an example we can give. When you talk about milk and curd, milk transforms itself into curd. So here the cause is transforming itself into curd. So it is a change of form that we see. The quantity of the milk that you had set as curd previous night is the same quantity. It is just that it has completely changed its property. So milk is the cause and curd is the effect, like that. So like this we have various cause and effect relationship. Another way of understanding this cause effect relationship is the subtle is the cause and the gross is the effect in terms of manifestation and unmanifestation. The most common example that we can think of is the causal body is the cause and the subtle body is the effect. The subtle body is the cause and then the gross body is the effect. So that is why it's called Karana Sharira. Karana means it's the cause. So that cause is like in a seed form, but you cannot really spot it. Like a seed. The example is like a seed, but the seed is hidden inside the ground. You can see it. But in this case, what is vasanas, what is causal body, we don't know. But from there emerges the mind and intellect, which is like a sapling. And then it grows on into a tree of gross body. So here is a cause and effect relationship like this. One thing where it can come closer is the example of the material cause, where we say gold is the cause and bangle is the effect. Gold is the cause and necklace is the effect. So here it is in a way how you look at it. Okay, so a person who looks it as gold sees as gold. A person who looks in the name and form sees as name and form. Like that it is. So this can be a closer or an example that can be taken as the cause and effect relationship between the unmanifest Brahman and the manifest universe. But the more profound example always given in the Shastras is that of rope and snake. When you say rope is the cause and snake is the effect, it is not in the same way as how snake emerges from the egg. There it is like from the seed the tree comes, from the egg the snake comes, like that you can say. But this is not the case here. This is called in Sanskrit, I think, as Anyonya Bhava. Anyonya Bhava means that which is inherent and inseparate and together in itself. But when it appears as a snake, rope is not visible. When it appears as a rope, snake is not visible. The original cause for that snake to appear is the existence of the rope only. So that is, you can say, as the primeval cause. And when a person is failing to understand it as it is, there is a chance that he will project something upon it. That something that is projected upon it will be somewhat similar to it, but it is not the original, and it is appearing as something different. So therefore this example of rope and snake, which is a very famous example in Vedanta, tries to give us the relationship between the Supreme Brahman and the universe. So that which is a rope, why should it appear as a snake? Again, this is the closest example, but obviously every example will have its own limitation. What is the limitation in this example? In the example of rope and snake, rope appears as snake, clear. But for who?
So Someone who doesn't have the
One was
knowledge.
seen a snake previously.
How? One was seen the snake previously, but not that everybody who has seen the snake previously has to see a snake now. That is not the case. He has known the knowledge of snake, so he is projecting a snake. That aspect what you say is right. But a perceiver who has not understood the rope as it is, and upon that he is projecting something else. In this example, the perceiver or one who is actually viewing this phenomenon is apart from the rope and snake. He is different from that. This is the closest example. See, if example is as good as the reality, then it's not an example, it is the same thing. Example is to have one or two aspects for you to understand the parallel tattva there. You cannot take the example beyond its scope. So obviously in the example of rope and snake, we say that there is a conducive atmosphere where there is a twilight and this person is walking in the garden and the rope is lying in the garden, and since he already knows that there are something like a snake, he can project that it can be a snake. And another point what he said is interesting. If this person assume, it is difficult to imagine, but assume if this person doesn't know what snake is, he cannot project a snake. That apart, that is not the scope of this example. Okay. Now, in the example where of rope and snake, where the perceiver is actually different from it, in this case that is not the situation. Brahman appearing as universe, the master says you are perceiving it differently. You are not apart from the universe. You are part and parcel of the universe. So then how it is actually playing, who is it creating, what is happening, this whole play is called as Maya. Therefore, if at all we need to understand it, this Maya has to be understood as an inherent power whose locus is in Brahman. Maya as a power, Maya as a Shakti is something which is inherent in Brahman itself. And then this power creates all the play, as it were, seems to be bigger than anything else, that it veils everything, but in reality it has no effect on Brahman. This has to be very clearly understood, because Swami Ramtirtha takes up this point only. He says, what is it Maya? You try to explain, it seems to be all powerful, so powerful that it covers the God only. So that means it is so powerful or more powerful than the God. It is not so. Vedanta doesn't accept Maya to be a different entity apart from Brahman. It is not possible, because there is no entity apart from Brahman. As a power, we have to understand that the power does not hang in a vacant air and just stays by itself or exhibits its power by itself. It is not possible. The power is there with somebody who wields the power. That is why statements like Mama Maya Duratyaya, says Krishna in Gita. So somebody is owning that Maya. Somebody is saying, this is my Maya. So when he says my Maya, Maya is under his control. That which is under his control cannot touch him. So he is called as Mayavi or Mayapati, or somebody who is the master of Maya. So he remains as it is. It doesn't affect him at all. But what is the play here? All of us are seeming to be deluded by that power of Maya. That is why Sa eva Maya parimohitatma, says this mantra. That self which is deluded by Maya. So that self which is deluded by Maya refers to all individuals who are under the spell of Maya. That individual which is under the spell of Maya is in essence not different from Brahman. But this play of Maya has made him forget the real entity that he is Brahman, and he is assuming to be himself something other than it. This is what is meant by the delusion of Brahman. See, we say, how are we saying that we are ignorant? This Maya has two powers. It is called as Avarna Shakti and Vikshepa Shakti. Avarna Shakti means the power of veiling, the power of covering. This is called as ignorance. This is called as non-apprehension. Vikshepa Shakti means projection. It is called as misapprehension. So how is that all-powerful entity of Brahman is not visible to us as it is that power which deludes the individual to not recognize Brahman as it is? This power is an exhibition of Maya only. And this non-apprehension or ignorance is the root cause. And from this non-apprehension is from where it is projected as pluralistic phenomenon, which from our standpoint shows completely different characteristics. Like when we say the inherent nature of Brahman is what? We said it is Satchitananda, right? Sat means that which is real, that which is constant throughout. That is called as Sat. Chit means it is consciousness. It is of the form of knowledge. Ananda means absolute bliss. But this individual whose essential nature Vedanta declares to be Satchitananda, actually what he is experiencing is totally opposite in all these three cases. Instead of a constant, unmoving, changeless reality, we see a constant changing phenomenon. So that Sat doesn't seem to apply in our experience. And what is to be seen as a manifestation of Chit Swarupa everywhere, consciousness everywhere, what we are seeing is inert matter, Jada. Everything is Jada, including the gross body. It is given Chit because of the consciousness functioning within. Otherwise, everything is inert matter that we experience. And Ananda we need not say. The inherent nature is Ananda. Everybody goes through only sorrow-ridden life, which seems to be absolutely opposite. So, whose inherent real nature is Satchitananda, in actual experience is seeming to be something else. What is this phenomenon? We really don't know. We really can't explain what it is. That is what is meant by the play of Maya. Now, is it that so powerful entity in which all of us are caught? Is there no way of redeeming ourselves? No, that is not the case. That is why Mama Maya Duratyaya says Krishna, and then he says Mameva ye prapadyante Maya metam tarantite. So the guarantee is given that the individual has the capacity to cross over the Maya, and those great jnanis who have crossed over the Maya, they are also making that statement that I am Satchidananda Swarupa, I am that absolute entity. They are making that statement, and they are saying that each and every one of us is supposed to cross over this and attain our original state only. So there is absolutely no a pessimistic feeling should not come that we are going to be absolutely in the spell of Maya all the time and we will be deluded all the time. That is not the case. There is a chance of retrieving ourselves, and all the study of scriptures and the sadhana that we do is meant for this only. But at present, what we consider ourselves is to be something apart from what we originally are. This play of the totality is called as the play of Maya. So, Saeva Maya Parimohitatma Sharira Mastaya Karoti Sarvam. The moment you consider yourself to be anything apart from Brahman, Sharira Mastaya, you are settled in a body. You acquire a body. Body here means gross body. Gross body includes subtle body and causal body. Body means it is a combination of all the three only. Body. So, this person who is inherently settled in a body considers himself to be an individual self who is totally different from the supreme self, which is the Atma. Sharira Mastaya Karoti Sarvam. But in essence, who is operating from within this body is that same supreme self only. Where is the dichotomy coming? It is just that the identification of us is with the gross body, subtle body and causal body. So equation wise you can remember that when the self identifies with the gross body, it is called as the waker, the waking personality. When the self identifies with the subtle body, it is called as the dreamer. And when the self identifies with the causal body, it is called as the deep sleeper. So the whole play happens because of the play of Maya, he says. Sa eva Maya parimohitatma shariram asthaya karoti sarvam. So if we are able to sort of comprehend this or understand this, what we need to gain as a knowledge from this is that inherently we believe ourselves to be somebody who we actually are not. And in the next mantra he is going to say, this attachment is punascha janmantara karma yoga. Because of the karma and attachment to that of many janmas, that this identification has become very, very strong. And only by knowledge of the self can we wriggle out of this attachment and consider ourselves to be the true being that we are. So therefore, he is going to further say after a few mantras that Tad Brahma Aham Iti Jnatva Sarva Bandhai Pramuchyate. That only by considering that myself to be I am Brahman can you remove yourself of all sins, all attachments. So this sharp arrow of Tattvamasi must be always be kept in our intellect. This, whenever our mind tends to get attached and it gets deeper into this identification, thus by creating more bondage and more attachment to this world, this knowledge that Aham Brahmasmi, this knowledge that Guru has given us Tattvamasi, these are the statements that must really keep us in the consciousness, keep us in the sadhana. And finally, we have to give up that intellect itself and go beyond it. In this context, this is not connected to the mantra, but a beautiful metaphor Swami Ramtirtha explains. In the good old days, they do various type of yajnas, and one of the most popular and powerful yajna is Ashwamedha yajna. Ashwamedha yajna is you are sacrificing a horse. That is the literal meaning. Whether it is literal, etc., we don't know. But it has a very beautiful symbolic meaning. This Ashwamedha yajna is performed by not normal people, performed by kings. And the king who is powerful enough to proclaim that he is the king of kings. So there is a horse which is meant for sacrifice, which is a special horse. That horse is allowed to run freely, and wherever it runs, whichever direction it runs, there is an army that is going behind it. If nobody is challenging the horse or doing anything to the horse, it is assumed that that territory comes under the control of this king, meaning that particular territory, that particular king has accepted the supremacy of this king. If somebody arrests the horse, stops its journey, then the army which is following the horse fights, defeats the other person and then releases the horse. Obviously, if it is not winning, then this person cannot claim himself to be the king of the king, because the other king is more powerful. So like this horse covers the entire nation. Finally, when it arrives back to the capital, that horse is sacrificed into the final yajna. This is the prescription or the general procedure of the ritual that is given. It's a beautiful metaphor, and who else except Swami Ramtirtha can explain it this way? What is this horse?
Your mind.
Your mind. Your mind is this horse. Now this mind is let loose and it is running everywhere wherever it is running and conquering the territories, that means those areas of ignorance are conquered by your knowledge of the self. Okay? Wherever this mind tends to get trapped, the army comes and shoots with the arrows and releases the horse. The army is the intellect. The sharp arrows are the arrows of Tattvamasi. With the sharp arrows of Tattvamasi, with the sharp arrows of this knowledge of the self, wherever the mind tends to get entrapped in the ignorant world, this knowledge of the self comes and shoots it and sort of releases it. By this process, the entire ignorance is conquered by your intellect, meaning mind and intellect. Finally, that horse is sacrificed into the fire. So finally, that intellect which has conquered everything in this world, conquering the ignorance by the knowledge of the self, finally sacrifices itself in the knowledge of the fire of the knowledge of the self. Then he becomes self-realized. It's a beautiful metaphor. I was reminded when we talked about how the Maya is conquered. Now, the play of Maya also can be understood from this angle, that every creation or every effect presupposes mainly two causes. One is a material cause and another is an efficient cause. Of course, there's a third cause that is given as an instrument, but that is only incidental. Instrument is only augmentation factor. The main two causes are the material cause and the efficient cause. When you take up the creation of a pot, the material cause is the mud or clay, and the efficient cause is the potter with his knowledge. So we can think of any creation in this world, every creation must have these two, that there is an efficient cause and there is a material cause. Can you think of any example where these two causes are one and the same?
So the world itself.
No, I am talking about example. In the world.
Spider will be.
Spider is an example that, in fact, is going to come in the next Upanishad, Mundaka. Very beautiful. It's one of the parallels, and one of the points to be explained is that only, that the spider does not bring any material apart from itself. And who is the person who is spinning the web? That is also the spider. So, here it's a parallel or example, but technically speaking, in the spider example, obviously there is a saliva of the spider which is seen as the material, and the spider is it is intelligently spinning the web. That apart, you take up anything in this world, the potter cannot be the clay, the goldsmith cannot be the gold. They are two different things. The potter uses the clay, with his knowledge he makes the pot. The goldsmith uses the gold, with his knowledge he makes the ornaments. Where the efficient cause and the material cause is one and the same, it is something like an illusion. The closest example is dream. In dream, the material is nothing but waker's mind only, and who spins the dream is also the waker, in the sense that it is the waker's mind which does it. That is very solid dream that we experience, but upon waking up we understand that it is a figment of imagination. But as long as it was there, it was very solid. So how did this play come about? This is the play of Maya. That is why very interesting in the next mantra, that is the 13th mantra. 12th mantra he explains the waker, 13th mantra he explains the dreamer and deep sleeper. There he says, Swapne Sajiva Sukha Dukkha Bhokta Swamayaya. Second time Maya comes here. Swamayaya. Swapne Sajiva. Sajiva here is talking about that individual. Sukha Dukkha Bhokta. He is experiencing the joys and sorrows. Swamayaya Kalpita Vishwaloke. That universe that he has spun by himself, Swamayaya. by his own Maya. That means here is a very clear indication that the power of Maya, which we said is inherent in Brahman, unless otherwise this individual who is created is not a Amsha of Brahman, how can he wield the same power? A dream is a very clear-cut example in our own experience that something is created, I wouldn't say of nothing, out of your own mind something is created where you go through an entirely different set of experiences from who you really are. Maybe you are a very rich person here and you may experience something totally drastic and opposite in the dream, and then you wake up and find it was all a play of imagination. What is this power within us? Who did this? I mean, it is inexplicable. Swamayaya, he says. It is the same thing. So, if this we can understand from the experience of us on a daily basis, you have to project it and understand how this individuality has come about. So, I would recommend that you, if you have that, you listen to the portion of what we talked about in the theory of perception that finally culminates in this only. So, that which is getting this projected by way of action and reaction, where there is only one entity, where there is no scope for the second, how this can happen, that inexplicable play is the explanation for Maya. So that is why Swami Ramtirtha very logically goes on to the portion of Maya after theory of perception. Theory of perception actually leads to this portion of Maya. So this is how the Supreme Brahman has taken up an entity which is rooted in the body now. Maya parimohitatma sharira mastaya karoti sarvam. Then he does everything. Striyan napanadi vichitra bhogai sayeva jagrat paritrupti meti. He is going through various experiences. He is enjoying the woman, he is enjoying the food, he is enjoying the drink. See, this could be taken in general. Striyan napanadi, he says, adi means starting from that, etc. That means all the experiences that you go through at the level of a waking personality, each and everything he goes through, paritrupti meti, fully satisfied with that. That means fully satisfied in what sense? We said in the last class that this is what it is. You get a complete satisfaction that this solid thing is real and there is nothing more than this. That is when you get satisfaction, right? So we understand this waking world is all that it is. There is nothing beyond this waking world. So we feel very satisfied. And this is what Swamiji says leads to what is known as complacency. A complacent factor comes that everything is fine. Paritrupti meti. So you can take these experiences that he has given to be covering everything. So this person or individuality has got what now it is known as a doership and an enjoyership. Kartrutva bhavana and bhoktrutva bhavana. He does all the action and takes that pride that I am doing the action, and he enjoys everything in this world with the attitude that I am enjoying all these things. So this person believes himself to be this individual and is completely immersed, involved in the activities of the world. This state of him is called as actually waker. He is only one aspect of his total personality, which is the waker. But he doesn't believe himself to be so. He believes himself to be everybody, everything. That's what it is. He is very satisfied with this. In another way, Swamiji has interpreted these three joys to be all the external enjoyments are represented by woman, all the internal enjoyments are represented by food, all the mind's intoxicating enjoyments are represented by the drink. Here, what drink we really do not know. It can be anything, or generally it can be taken as annapana also, because these are all also taken as basic instincts. All the desires, first desires are the instinctive desires, then apart from it, what are the other egocentric desires? So the basic instinctive desires of hunger and thirst, and then the instinctive desire of physical companionship. This is common to all individuals if you take, natural to all individuals. So starting from that, you can take it as all desires. So striyan apanadi vichitra bhogehi, all types of enjoyments. Saeva Jagrat Paritruptimeti. Jagrat means the avastha or the state of consciousness when a person is awake. In the waking personality, he is called as, what is the name? That's also not Prajna, Prajna. That's a deep sleeper. He is called Vishwa. Vishwa is the waker. Taijasa is the dreamer. And Prajna is the deep sleeper. These are the common terms given for the microcosmic waker, dreamer and deep sleeper. Vishwa represents actually the name is Vishwa means universe. So this universe which we are in touch with is the name of the waker who is experiencing this universe. In the dream world he is called as Tejasa. It comes from the word Tejas, which is light. Because the subtle body is made up of the consciousness without any connection with the gross elements. So it is as it were the light which is manifesting itself in the dream world. See, to put it in a very simple way, even when your eyes are closing only, you can experience this light, right? The light that is outside, that is experienced only when the eyes are open. When you sleep, the eyes are closed, and yet you are able to see the dream. You are able to see the dream. There is something which is providing the light, which is making up that dream world. That light is nothing but the light of the consciousness inside. So that is associated with the name given to the dreamer, which is Tejasa, who is born of light. Tejas. And deep sleeper is called as Prajna. Jna is a term which represents knower. Sarvajna means knows everything. Alpajna means knows something, little, knows only little. Kinchitnya, they say. Kinchitnya means very little he knows. A in Sanskrit is opposite. Ajna means knows nothing, is ignorant. Pra is a term which is used as a special emphasis. So pra plus ajna is prajna. Prajna means he is absolutely knows nothing. Is the emphasis there. So that is the state of a deep sleeper. Tamo vibhuta sukha rupa meti, he says. So when the tamas has completely overcome this personality, he takes the role of a deep sleeper. So Vishwa, Tejasa and Prajna are the three entities that we assume and we go through on a daily basis. In the waking personality, the self manifests itself completely through all the three bodies, gross, subtle and cause. So that is why we identify with the gross body, we say. When we say gross body, subtle and causal body are understood. It is there behind supporting the gross body. So a complete manifest personality is this Vishwa, waker. In this, as far as the human beings are concerned, the intellect is in a fully developed state and it is functioning. So our activities are conscious. So if you want to loosely use these three terms, conscious, subconscious and unconscious, you can equate to these three personalities. We are conscious in the waking state, we are in the subconscious state during the dream, we are in the unconscious state during the deep sleep. And as far as a human being is concerned, there is a conscious choice of action also available in the waking state, which is not there in dream state, which is not there for other creatures. That is why we said, as far as the individual is concerned, he has both Kartrutva Bhavana and Bhoktrutva Bhavana in the waking state. In the dream, there is only Bhoktrutva Bhavana. There is no Kartrutva Bhavana. If dream had Kartrutva Bhavana, then you will have committed sin or virtue, punya or papa, you would have gained in dream also. That is not the case. There is no doership in the dream. There is only enjoyership in the sense that you experience the dream as it were and you go through the effect as it were. So there is only bhoktrutva in the dream. In the waking state, there is both this doership and enjoyership. This person who is a waker, he is conscious of the outside world and inside world, and therefore waker knows all the three states of consciousness. Knows all the three states means he knows the waking state, he knows the dream state, he knows what the deep sleep state is. Other two states are like a subset of these two. So he has emerged out of it and he knows all the three states of consciousness. But as far as the identification is concerned, waker identifies with the gross body, and for him this world alone is real. Even though he has woken up from the dream, he rejects the dream world. He rejects the dreamer and the dream world based on knowledge. Based on the knowledge of the waking world, he rejects the dream world, saying that it is a figment of imagination. That it really doesn't, if it were real, it has to exist somewhere. No, it doesn't exist. So based on the knowledge, he has completely rejected. But what is interesting is, we can say, if you were to enter a dreamer's world and say that what you are going through is not the real world, it is something as a dream, you belong to some other world, you are sleeping in Alipur or you are sleeping in Baliganj in your place, that is what you really are, that dreamer will reject this waking world. The waker rejects the dream world and the dreamer rejects the waking world, but the dreamer rejects the waking world based on
Ignorance.
it is ignorance. Dreamer doesn't know what waking world is, and he cannot see also. Based on that ignorance, he will just not understand what you say and he will reject it. So the waker rejects the dream world based on knowledge, and the dreamer rejects the waking world based on ignorance. So when this waking personality, which is all of us now, when this person goes into the state of sleep, there are two distinct or different states that he can go through. One is called as dream, where you spin a world and you experience whatever is happening there. Another is a world, you can't call it world, you can't call it anything. It is the absence of everything. That is called as deep sleep, a dreamless sleep. So in dream, what happens? Why is this dream created? This dream is created because of the undigested experiences of what you go through in the waking state. There are certain things that needs to be finished off, and it throws itself up in the dream in a hazy way. So that is why, compared to the waking world, the dream world is very hazy. First of all, we don't or we can't remember most of the dreams. In one of the science documentaries, I think in academy or somewhere we saw, where he gives a staggering statement, which I still find it difficult to believe even now, is that we go through many dreams in a normal course of sleep on an everyday basis, is what they say. When he say many dreams, 20 to 30 dreams like that. Let's assume on an average a person goes through sleep for 7 to 8 hours. In that, to have visualized 20 to 30 dreams is phenomenal. But what of the dream that we remember? We remember the last portion of the last dream, if at all it is powerful enough, just before you wake up. That's all we remember. So it all scatters away. It all just vanishes just like that. Swami Ramakrishna Paramahamsa says, the dream disappears as fast as a salt doll disappears in ocean. In an ocean, imagine you are looking from the bottom of the ocean and somebody is immersing a salt doll. Before he asks, do you recognize the leg? Do you recognize the body of the doll? Before you recognize everything, as you immerse, how it instantaneously it disappears. Like that, instantaneously our dreams also disappear, that we don't remember any aspect of it. As I said, if at all, if it is powerful, we remember the last portion of the last dream, which might have startled us, if it is powerful enough like that. Or certain dreams, if it is very consistently coming, that we will remember. Otherwise, we don't remember, generally. But if at all you can recall anything, sometimes the dream can be very hazy. So again, I leave you with this question for you to think about, that why is it that compared to this world, dream world is hazy? Sometimes we see and experience most of the things that is like this only here. That only came, led to some of the thinkers to assume that what we undergo in dream is the same as this world. So the person who is undergoing the dream world, who is a dreaming personality, who is the person in the dream, whom we refer to for convenience sake as dreamer. Many thinkers have assumed that waker and dreamer are the same person, which is not so. Waker and dreamer are two distinct and different personalities. For the simple reason, the waker is sleeping on the bed here. He is living, he is digesting his food, he is breathing, he is doing all the physiological functions that are happening. But within himself, he has spun a different world and he is enjoying. He can be in America, he can be somewhere else where his body is very clearly in Calcutta, in his house where he is sleeping. So obviously these two are different personalities. The dreaming personality is different, the waking personality is different. Most of the time we may experience similar. As I said, it's only a throw up of the undigested thoughts of the waking state. But sometimes as a mixture, as a khichdi, you will get some unimaginable things in the dream. It is possible. And if you compare that experience of the dream and this experience of you in the waking world, you can never reconcile. In the sense, in the dream suddenly you will catch a flight and in 5 minutes you will be in America, where there is a house and you ride a horse suddenly inside the house and you jump into the palace, something. Everything can happen. Any type of whatever you can sort of imagine that can happen, which does not conform to the laws of time, space and causation as we understand here. What we can understand is that it is a separate time, space, causation. Dream has this. Dream has time, space and causation concept. Deep sleep doesn't have. Waking state has. But in waking state, the time, space, causation is pakka. Not an inch of a second here or there it will go. Not a centimeter here or there it will go. And it is very precise. And the law functions so meticulously here. But in dream that need not be the case. Anything can happen. You can even pour water and get something gold or something on the other side, which has no direct cause and effect relationship. This can happen. Think about it as to why it happens. We'll continue in the next class. Yes, sir.
Sir, you said that Maya has two parts, Avarana and Vikshep.
Yeah.
Now, in case of a Jivan Mukta, when he attains knowledge, his Avarana is totally removed, but the covering that he is deluded is removed. But he is still in the world and he sees the world of multitude projections.
No, not multitude. He sees only Ekatvam Anupashyata. In fact, of these two, Avarana goes last. So you go through the Ishavasya mantra 6 and 7 again, where he says first the extrinsic illusion goes, then the intrinsic illusion goes. So first Shoka goes, then the Moha goes. So first the misapprehension goes, then the non-apprehension goes. So when the power of Avarana is there, only then the power of Vikshepa comes. Only when the truth is veiled can false be projected. When the truth is, when the ignorance is conquered, that's all. The journey is over.
Okay, now the example was what we took about the spider weaving, the material cause and the efficient cause being same, it is an illusion. Now there are certain times when example is given like hairs coming out of body. Now here also the material cause.
No, yeah. So when we take up Mundaka, we will take this up in detail because there is a very wonderful shloka, Yatornanapi Shrutache Grinnatecha. It has to be dealt in detail with reference to what are the aspects of example that ought to be taken and what are the shortcomings of example and why for one shortcoming another example is given. So 3 examples are coming up in the same mantra. When we take up Mundaka, we will take it up in detail.
See, this the Maya is when we talk about Maya, it is macrocosmic.
When we
When we talk about Maya, it is macrocosmic, and when we talk about Jiva, it is individual macrocosmic. We say that it is avidya. I mean, Jiva in avidya is projecting all these things. Now, is it easier to conquer avidya and Maya separately, or
No. That which is causing us the differentiation between this microcosm and macrocosm itself is the Maya. So it is not that you are going to conquer that separately and this separately. It is nothing like that. Avidya is the aspect of avidya in the individual is the play of Maya. Nothing else. They are not separate from each other.
So then it is easier to conquer a dream state world to a waking world. It happens almost naturally. Without any effort. But it doesn't, the transformation in degree from waker to a Turiya state or some realized state doesn't happen naturally.
Correct.
So there must be something different with respect to macrocosm and microcosm, isn't it?
Correct. That is why the coming into Maya was again not based on our effort. Therefore, getting out of Maya is also not in our effort. That is why he says, Mameva ye prapadyante Maya metam tarantite. Who has put us into the Maya alone can take us out of the Maya. To him, if we surrender, chances are that we will cross Maya. All the effort that we can put in is to make us conducive enough for his grace, as it were. Then final Maya, how when it is removed is not in our hands as it is. So it doesn't come under the purview of effort. So when you say is it easy or difficult, that question cannot be answered because it is not pertaining to any finite effort of the individual.
This we are talking about creation, and simultaneously we are talking about illusion. Illusion means it's because the play of Maya, this illusory world. So when can a creation be called as an illusion type of thing? Because it must be manifestation and unmanifestation that we should talk about rather than creation and destruction.
The moment you say manifestation and unmanifestation, you have already created the world. Now we are only talking about how that has come about. We'll conclude with the bhajans here.
पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते।